Murex was a smelly process and was said to have made Tyre reek. After Alexander's conquest, the Phoenician homeland ceased to be independent and passed into Greek hands. Rome took possession of the region and made it part of the Roman Empire. Of all the Phoenician cities, Carthage is the most important. Carthage is better known than her mother city, Tyre, because of its wars with Rome. There is also more archaeological and literary evidence about Carthage than all the other Phoenician cities combined. Carthage began as a colony of Tyre sometime around 800 BC. Established on a sandstone peninsula jutting out into the sea, the site was easily defended and formed a natural harbor. Located near modern-day Tunis, Carthage traded in gold, slaves, ivory, and ostrich feathers, coming across the desert to the south. From across the sea to the north came tin, copper, lead, and textiles. Within 100 years, Carthage overtook Tyre as the leading city of the Phoenician civilization. Within its walls, the southern part of the city was low and flat, while the northern part rose to a hilly plateau. The district around the harbor, the Byrsa, was the business district, full of apartment buildings, some up to 6 stories high. A typical Phoenician house consisted of an entrance hall, which led to a courtyard around which rooms were laid out. To the side, there was a room with a separate entrance, which was often used as a workshop or storeroom. With no source of water inside the city walls, each house had a cistern to collect rainwater. A well, called the Fountain of 1000 Amphorae, built of fine masonry, also supplied the city with groundwater. The business of Carthage was import and export. Its ceramics were without rival. The production of dyed wool fabrics had no competition. Carthage exported sought-after luxury items like jewelry, perfumes, glass, and inlaid furniture. Religion dominated Carthaginian civilization, and the supreme god was Baal. Sacrifice was the primary act of the Phoenicians' religion, and Carthaginian priests are believed to have sacrificed animals, and even young children, to their gods.
It had long been assumed that these were child sacrifices for good crops or for to begin the new year. But there's been a movement lately of saying, no, people could not be that cruel. And they must have had plagues. That's it. My own opinion is that I think, unfortunately, they were child sacrifices. We know that it's a long Near Eastern tradition to do this sort of thing. It's in the Old Testament. We read in Isaiah, we read elsewhere in the Old Testament of the practice of people going down in the valley of Hinnom, that is the southern valley where at the base of Jerusalem, offering child sacrifices to the gods, specifically to one of the forms of Baal or Moloch.
Carthage also set up colonies in Spain, including cities like Cadiz, Cartagena, and Ibiza, which made the whole southern region Carthaginian. These cities traded with Egypt, Rome, and Greece, as well as faraway Britain and the west coast of Africa. As masters of the Mediterranean, the Carthaginians had a large fleet. To support their maritime trade, their harbor was cleverly laid out in a unique two-part design. The square-shaped outer harbor was used for the commercial fleet and warehousing trade products. A narrow canal provided entrance to the naval base. Built around the circular basin were wide arcades to house more than 200 warships. In the center of the lagoon was a magnificent round building. Here, the warships of the fleet were constructed and repaired. From the top of the building, the Navy's commander could watch the fleet leave and return to port. The great success of Carthage led to conflict with the other great power of the time, Rome. As Rome expanded, it fought with Carthage for possession of Sicily, leading to the First Punic War. Of all the Carthaginian leaders, Hannibal is the most well-known. According to Napoleon, Hannibal was the greatest mercenary leader of all time, a military genius. Because of Carthage's small population, its army depended on well-paid mercenaries with the promise of huge amounts of booty. Hannibal began the Second Punic War by setting out over the Alps with his mercenary army and elephants. For 15 years, Hannibal fought Rome's armies and defeated all that opposed him. All that changed in 204 BC, when the Roman army led by Publius Cornelius Scipio crossed the Mediterranean and invaded North Africa. Without cities to plunder, Hannibal's army had no motivation to defend Carthage. Hannibal could only watch as his army was broken and destroyed in the final battle in North Africa that took place at Zama in 202 BC. Chased by the Romans from city to city, Hannibal was finally betrayed and handed over to his sworn enemy. The great mercenary leader committed suicide by taking poison in 183 BC. Carthage was forced into a treaty it could never uphold with Rome. Rome attacked Carthage in 149 BC and began a third and final war with its great rival. The armies of Carthage held off Rome for 3 years before finally falling in 146 BC. The few survivors were sold as slaves, and the whole city was pillaged and burned to the ground. Years later, the Emperor Augustus took to rebuilding Carthage by establishing a new Roman colony with up to 3,000 inhabitants. From a heap of rubble, a new city once again rose up on the coast of North Africa. The Romans rebuilt Carthage with unprecedented splendor. The amphitheater, an oval-shaped arena built in the outskirts of the city, was the scene of many spectacles. In the archaeological park are the remains of a Roman villa. This house, with its splendid view of the entire coast, is known as the House of the Aviary because of its mosaic floor portraying an aviary. It has a classic courtyard surrounded by columns and a small octagonal garden. This wonderfully beautiful mosaic, typical of Roman art of Africa, and called the Dominus Julius, is one of the most remarkable examples of Roman art in Tunisia.
Hey, it's your turn.
As Christianity replaced paganism, the church Domus Caritatis, the largest Christian basilica in Africa, was built. Early Christian tombs have recently been rediscovered here, and in the Museum of Carthage, there are the remains of crosses, vases, and terracotta tiles found in some of the tombs. Long spared the destruction that swept the Roman Empire in 439 AD, Carthage was overrun by the Vandals of Central Europe, who crossed from Spain into North Africa and destroyed the city. They were a hard-boiled people, unsentimental in their dealings, but the Phoenicians were a clever people who prospered in war and peace. They excelled in seamanship and trade, ruled an empire, and developed a writing system we still use today. Our our knowledge of them comes mostly from their enemies, the Greeks and Romans, who fought bitterly with them. But the Phoenicians were a proud and peaceful people, whose achievements have left a large impression on the cultures of the Western world.